Mike, are we ready to go?
Yep, I'm ready.
Right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. My name is David McNeil. I'm your MC today. Well, almost exactly 5 years ago, on the 29th of December 2019, Carlos Ghosn, the boss of Nissan, was famously smuggled out of Japan in a large equipment box onto a private plane and off to Istanbul. The man who engineered that escape is here with us today, Mike Taylor. Good morning, Mike. Or good evening for you, I guess.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us 2 days before Christmas as well. Mike is a former Green Beret. He and his son, Peter, were subsequently detained in the U.S. The U.S. State Department agreed to extradite both men to Japan, despite protests from them and appeals to the Trump White House. They were extradited in March 2021. Mr. Taylor pleaded guilty and was later convicted of aiding an immigration violation. He spent 17 months in solitary confinement, during which he says he had 2 showers in 6.5 months and suffered frostbite, conditions widely regarded as torture. He was deported back to the US in October 2022. Of course, in Japan, Mr. Taylor has been branded a criminal because he helped a criminal escape. He's ready to share his experience today and answer questions from all of you about his role in what is widely seen as one of the most audacious escapes in modern history. Just a reminder, you can submit your questions online via the FCCJ website. And of course, we have people in the room. I'll always prioritize people in the room. If you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand and let me know. Mr. Taylor, would you like to say a few words first, or will we plunge right in?
No, I guess one of the main issues that I would like to talk about and bring attention to is the Convention Against Torture and how people are treated in the Japanese judicial system, the hostage justice system, if you will. You have any of the rights that you'd have in the Western world don't exist over there. There's no attorney-client privilege. There's no confidentiality communications with your attorneys. You are put in solitary confinement. You're limited to all your communications. And Japan is a signature going back of the Convention Against Torture, going back to June 1999 when they first signed it. And Article 2 says there'll be no cruel, inhumane, or degrading punishment whatsoever. And there's no excuses either. So people that are working as prison guards don't have the excuse. The language is very clear. So that's one of the main points I would like to discuss and hopefully answer some questions about.
Got it. Thank you. And we should just reiterate that we do always ask the Justice Ministry to come, because we've had many of these kind of criticisms of Japan's jails and its justice system. And we asked the Justice Ministry to come many times, but they generally decline. So I'll just scan the room. I have a question online, but let me just ask if anybody in the room would like to ask a question. Not yet. Okay. First question comes from Hans Grimmel of Automotive News. How did you feel about spending time in prison for helping Carlos Ghosn while Ghosn himself was a free man in Lebanon? How much resentment or bitterness did you feel?
I didn't feel any resentment or bitterness. That was the operation to do, is to set him free so he wasn't tortured. That's how it was presented to me early on, and why I said I would do it. It was my understanding that he was being tortured. And some of the really bizarre things I still can't believe today that come from a civilized nation such as Japan is that condition of his bail. He wasn't even allowed to speak to his wife. I don't know any other country on earth that does that. And that's pretty shocking, that not see her, but not even speak to her on the telephone. That was a condition of the bail. And if he spoke to his wife, then they could revoke his bail and put him back into solitary confinement. And to get to a trial, you're talking 3.5 years before you can get to trial. So he would have to go 3 or 3.5 years without being able to speak to his wife. So the answer to your question, I felt no resentment whatsoever.
Right. So when the question was, how did you feel about spending time in prison? You don't feel anything at all. The fact that he was at the time a free man in Beirut, and you were fine. You were in prison at the time.
Mission accomplished.
Got it.
No, I didn't have any resentment whatsoever.
All
How
right.
do I feel about being in prison? Prison sucks. Put it plainly simple. You're in solitary confinement, for 17 months. The United Nations says their definition of torture is 15 consecutive days or more in solitary confinement. Well, we sure surpassed that mark, didn't we? And degrading and inhumane treatment. Come on, 2 showers in 6 months.
Right.
I'm not asking about staying at the Waldorf Astoria, but come on, let's have some basics.
Sure. And how about your son, Peter? What was his treatment like?
Treatment was no better. It was pretty much the same. I think I may have spent a little more time in solitary, and this poor guy had really nothing to do with the overall operation. He didn't even know that was going to happen that day. So, again, there's politics that go into this a lot, and everybody knows it's no secret that Japan spends 130, 150 million dollars a year on lobbyists inside the Washington D.C. area. So they have a lot of influence with American politicians.
Well, they don't have any influence here, just to let you know. Do you want to just take us back to how this plan was hatched? Are you able to talk about that in as much detail as you can? Like, how originally did the plan come about? Did you know Gon before it all kicked off, for example?
No, I didn't. I didn't know him. It eventually came to my attention. I ended up meeting with his wife, Carol, who just, digressing just a moment, still has a red notice on her for what? I have no idea. And, they came up with a charge on her after Carlos escaped, which, again, I have no idea why. And how long does those red notices go for? It's not like, if she's got any crime whatsoever, it's not the crime of the century. So she's got to spend her entire life with essentially a lifelong sentence of having a red notice on her. But going back to your question is, I met with Carlos's wife, Carol, who was very articulate, very sad, very distraught because her husband went through this trauma. He was put in solitary confinement, for the first charge. Then, I guess right before he was going to be released, they charged him a second time and to a third time. So he went, through that gauntlet of being charged and playing the game of, well, we're about to let you go because we can only hold you for 22 or 23 days, something like that. And then they charge him on the 22nd day with another crime to stay that, and they keep him in longer. So these are some of the things that I was hearing about, and the information I had was he was in fact being tortured. He was in solitary confinement. By the time that it came to my attention, he was out on bail. And like I said, one of those conditions of bail was he couldn't even speak to his wife on the telephone. So that didn't sit well with me, thinking that, Japan is a civilized nation and good people and honorable people, yet that's a condition of bail. And that was a big issue. So anyways, in getting the information that I needed, what Carol had, again, she was very articulate and she carried that torch well. Representing him, I got enough information to start planning how to get him out. And essentially, the guy's a megastar in the automotive world, in the business world. So it's not like I can walk him through, the commercial airport and jump on a plane and get out of there. So that wasn't going to happen. We had to find a way to disguise him, and what better way to disguise somebody than hiding them in a box. An equipment box where nobody actually sees them. So without going through all the inertia and the details of it, that's essentially the Reader's Digest version. Put them in a box on a private airplane and departed the country.
Right. And you had some experience of doing this before all this kicked off? I mean, presumably you knew what to do.
Um,
I'm not asking you to get yourself into trouble. Just say what you can.
Oh, no. These were always done for the government or on behalf of the government. So no, I've done them several times before. It's just like any mission. Every mission is unique. Every mission is different. This one was unique and different in its own ways. And, because we were dealing with such a high, powerful business megastar that everybody knew, we had to find a way of disguising his extraction. And that was the reason why I did it that way.
Right. When you say you had experience of this by government, you mean the U.S. government, is it? The American government?
Yes, that's correct. The U.S. government, whether it had been through, the Department of Justice, military, there's a whole bunch of things. The bottom line is it doesn't matter who you're doing it for, with regard to being the operational aspect, as long as it's legal. But the operational aspect is always, there's similarities, but there's always, each operation is unique. No two targets are the same, if you will. Attacking a target or extracting a human being. They're never the same, but they do have same basic elements that you have to accomplish and think about in order to, get that person brought to freedom.
Right. Are you in any position to say are you in a position to say the kind of work you did before for the U.S. government when you did these kind of operations, similar operations? Are you able to just give us an idea of what you might be talking about?
Well, some of them, for example, are kidnap Americans who were taken abroad by a family member or non-family member and taken into countries where we didn't have the capability to go and liberate that person or rescue them from being kidnapped. So we get a call about some of those situations. And whatever country it happened to be in, got to go through sometimes the proper process and the proper legal channels to get it done. For example, there was one in Belfast, Ireland. We had to go through the Lord Chancellor's office, get the proper permission and get cooperation from the police up in the Belfast, the city of Belfast. So those are some of the types of situations that have happened in the past.
Right. And in what way did the operation in Japan differ from those previous operations? What kind of difficulties did it
One,
pose?
we're dealing with an adult who's known by everybody in the world pretty much. And especially in Japan, a very small but densely populated country, where if he walked down the street, for a half a kilometer, he might find, 80 to 100 people that say hello to him or recognize him. So that was quite unique and presented a real challenge that we had to overcome.
Right. And there's a lot of talk online about the fact that you and Mr. Ghosn have since fallen out. Are you in a position to comment about that?
No, there's no really falling out. I was asked to do X, Y, and Z, and I did X, Y, and Z. Other than that, there's really nothing to follow up on or talk about per se.
Right. And obviously, I'm going to ask about money. I mean, money changed hands, right?
Well, yeah, there was, money and all that came out in the public of what was spent on the operation and what was presented for the operation. And the other issue is, all the legal fees incurred, fighting the extradition and then dealing with the extensive legal fees in Japan, even just for pleading guilty, because we pled guilty in Japan. We didn't go to trial. Yeah. So, yeah, obviously finances are a part of it. But, there's no need to get into, more detail than that about the finances, other than, when you're trying to defend yourself. I was thinking, imagine what the fees would be if I had to wait 3.5 years. My son also, who really had nothing to do with this, the poor guy. And we're going to wait 3 to 3.5 years to get to trial. So we sit in solitary confinement until that time. That's something that's interesting that should be talked about. Greg Kelly I believe it took him like 2.5 or 3 years before he could get to trial. Something
Right.
along those lines.
Well, let's talk about that. We will talk about that, but just clear up the money first, because that's the kind of question that people will want to know. You know, I mean, you've said that it sat badly with you that Gome was being held in solitary, and that that he had been mistreated like this, and that this was a motivation for you. But obviously, people will want to know about the financial motivation, yeah? And just in as much detail as you can. So obviously, you wanted to be paid for your legal expenses, but did you also want to be paid for the operation itself? Obviously, you did, yeah?
Well, yeah, but money, I never asked about money. We never discussed money. Actually, Carlos had mentioned money beforehand for service fee, and I said, no, we'll discuss all that later. So no, money, this wasn't done for money. This was done out of motivation for what, I thought at the time, and I still do think to a large degree, that there's a human being tortured and mistreated. It was a travesty of justice being done on a guy. And again, go back to beating that drum about you can't talk to your wife, you can't talk to your spouse. What are they doing? Trying to, incite a divorce?
No, obviously, but I mean, there's lots of people in prison, lots of people being tortured all over the world. Why this particular guy is what people will want to know, yeah? Why did you decide on him?
I didn't decide on him. It was brought to my attention. If somebody's got somebody else being tortured somewhere, let me know about it. I can help, I will.
All right. And just the issue, sorry, just to clear this up, on the issue of your legal fees, there has been talk that Gone has not paid your legal fees, or that he hasn't financially reimbursed you to the point where you're in debt. Is that true at all?
No, he has paid some legal fees. So, that's not fully accurate.
Right. He has paid some legal fees, but some are still outstanding. Would that be correct to understand?
Yeah, and there's still legal fees that come. We had lawyers in Japan that represented my son Peter and I, and from a humanitarian perspective, we had one lawyer who's Japanese American, Grant Tanabe. He was just a phenomenal human being and touched our hearts, because he's somebody that really cared and came to visit us a lot. But fees ultimately, and this is for a plea. We pled guilty. We didn't go to trial. Just those fees alone for one law firm was over $500,000. That's pretty expensive, for my likings.
Absolutely. And can you mention the name of that lawyer again? Sorry, the lawyer who came to see you.
Grant Tanabe.
Grant Tanabe.
Phenomenal human being, great lawyer. He was wonderful for my son and I. He understood what we were going through, as if he had been through it himself, which he hasn't, obviously. But he was just, a spectacular human being that we really appreciate, and we'll never forget the rest of our lives.
Thank you. And what about your time in prison? I mean, you obviously had a very hard time. Did you have people come to see you? And what about the authorities in Japan? Did they ever indicate anything? Did they ever say anything to you? Or was it just a sort of an anonymous legal system sort of swinging into motion? Did they ever say to you, oh, we're sorry for what happened to you, or anything like that?
Did who say that?
The authorities, the prison authorities. Did they ever have personal words to you?
Some did. And I can tell you this, the prison officials at the Tokyo detention house were very professional. They cared about their job, and every aspect of it and every facet of what they did was professional. They didn't look to torture anybody per se. They're part of the system that is designed to torture people. It's set up based off of torture. Now, at Fuchu prison, we were held at Tokyo detention house, both Peter and I, for about 6 months. We pled guilty right away, but for some reason it took 6 months for us in solitary confinement there before we could get, sentenced and moved. So I guess 6 months is a long time. Don't know why it took that long, but it did. They were very professional.
Right.
No, I won't say the same for the people that worked at Fuchu prison.
Why do you say that?
Well, one official that was in charge of the place I worked for a little while, the electric factory. That individual was very professional, did a phenomenal job. And mind you, I'm from military background, both me and my father, career soldier, he was as well. We understand how you develop people, how you teach people, how you train people, and get them to comply with what you want to do. There's a variety of ways to do that. That young corrections officer did a phenomenal job. He was very good, very sharp, very mature, and professional all around. There's other ones in there that, enjoy the yelling and screaming for no reason, like that's supposed to scare us or intimidate us. It doesn't, not at all. And then there's other issues where the attorney Grant Tanabe and others came to tell me that my father was dying and only had a matter of weeks left. And then about an hour or two after that, I was called into a room by one of the, supervisors of the prison. I don't know, it was a deputy warden or what, but he tried baiting me. I thought I was being called back for grief counseling. They're going to offer grief counseling, or would you like to call your father before he dies? Something along those lines. And what he did, he says, sets me down with the interpreter, of course, and says, I understand you had a meeting with the lawyers today. Or did you have a meeting with the lawyers today? I said, well, yeah, I did. And if you didn't know I had a meeting with my lawyers, it means they must have snuck in here. So now he's already getting a little antsy. And I'm giving it back to him for a reason, because that's how they're treating us. And then he says, well, it's against our policy to raise your voice. And so that's not relevant to me. He says, well, I understand that you raised your voice. I said, no, I didn't raise my voice. There's 5 people in that room, and 4 of them will tell you I didn't raise my voice. There's 2 lawyers on the other side of the glass. There's me sitting here. There's a guard sitting right next to me, leg to leg, and then the interpreter's sitting next to the guard. I said 4 out of the 5 people would tell you I did not raise my voice. He says, who are the 4 people? I said, the 2 attorneys and myself. There's 3. Well, I'll tell you I didn't raise my voice. And the 4th one is Shard, who was sound asleep. And if I had raised my voice, he would have woke up. And if you doubt what I'm saying, check the videotape. So he wasn't happy with my response on that. But again, they're not offering a grief counselor or call your father. He's looking to get me in trouble.
Did you get to talk?
Because allegedly, I raised my voice when they told me my father was dying.
Right. Did you get to talk to your father before he passed away?
Of course not. They wouldn't allow me to.
They wouldn't. They specifically said, we cannot do that. We cannot allow you to speak to your dying father.
No, they didn't say it like that. Unfortunately, what they do, they play the game. Okay. The game is, well, you got to get some kind of document from the hospital or where your father is confirming that he's dying, and what is he dying from, and when's he going to die. And then that has to go to the Ministry of Justice, to the State Department, to the Ministry of Justice, to the Japanese embassy, from there over to the Ministry of Justice in Tokyo, blah, 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 blah. But when they told me with 3 weeks, my father had already passed away.
I see. I'm sorry to hear that. When you went through all this ordeal, did you feel that it was personally cruel to you, or did you feel that it was just an anonymous system working? In other words, do you feel that you were singled out, or do you think this applies to everybody who's in prison, in Fuji prison?
No, I think it pretty much applies to everybody in prison because that's how the system is set up. There may have been a few of the people involved that enjoyed the fact that I was there, and they got the extradition completed. So they may have wanted to stick that knife in the back a little bit and twist it. But I think for the most part, it's the system of what is set up. It seems like it's, World War II system that's still in place there because, June of 1999, Japan became a signatory of the United Nations Convention Against Torture. It says you won't torture anybody and there's no excuses whatsoever for it. Yet their system is designed for just that, for torture.
Right. So nobody ever said to you at any point where, you know, we resent what you did, you helped this criminal escape, you flouted Japan's laws, this is why you're being punished in this way. That was never expressed to you verbally, right?
No, it was not.
All right. Thank you. The next question is online. It's
Officially,
officially,
it wasn't expressed to me. Unofficially, it was.
unofficially in your treatment, you mean?
Yeah, no, other people have said it
Oh,
unofficially.
I see. Who said it to you?
So, several government officials from Japan.
They said that when you were in Japan or afterwards?
No, when I was in Japan, you know, the real issue here is that you humiliated us by, you know, bringing Carlos in.
Right. I'm just curious about that. So did they actually say you humiliated us? They said this to you off the record, and who said it? I'm sure people will be curious about that.
Yeah, they did say it off the record.
Are you able to say who said that to you?
No, because it's off the record.
Well, I mean, just give us an indication. It was a politician, it was an official?
No, government officials.
Government officials. I see. The next question is from Eiichiro Tokumoto, who's a writer and member of this club. When you were detained at the Fuchu prison in Tokyo, what was the most hardship for you? How was the food? Did you have a language problem with prison guards? Did they have a good translator at the prison for foreign inmates? That's 4 questions, but maybe one by one. What was the worst hardship for you?
Probably the lack of communication with your family and friends, the outside world.
Right. So you weren't able.
The second would be the solitary confinement and the cold and the frostbite.
Right. You weren't able to talk to your family at all?
You can only write 4 letters a month.
Right.
And the max is 35 characters per line for a total of 7 pages.
You had to write it in English, or yeah, obviously English, right? Yeah.
No, I write it in English, sure. But if I say, "Dear David, how are you today? Please tell my dog Spot that I said hello." Well, that counts as 2 letters because I'm saying, please communicate to a second party.
I see.
So these are the games they play with you.
Right. And no phone calls, obviously.
No phone calls whatsoever.
All right. And you said that the other hardship was being in solitary confinement and the frostbite.
Yeah, because there's no heat in there. In wintertime, obviously, you know, it gets cold in Japan.
Obviously, yeah. It's very cold now, actually. And the food?
The food was, I would say it's just a bit better than Alpo. Alpo was used to be a very famous dog food here in America.
So the food was slightly better than dog food.
Slightly better than Alpo.
I'm sorry, correct. I shouldn't laugh, but it was a funny line. Like what kind of food was it?
A lot of soup, tofu. And, you know, when we were locked down in solitary confinement during the so-called COVID days, they would give us prepackaged food that came from outside. It was always cold in plastic packages. And it was, I don't know, I couldn't tell you what it was. Sometimes it was rice, sometimes it was other things of the Japanese, you know, meals, which I didn't know what they were.
Right. And did you have a language problem with the prison guards is the 3rd question?
Yeah, there's very few prison guards that spoke another language. They did have an outstanding interpreter, one lady, a civilian interpreter. They had some interpreters who were actually in uniform, and that's one of them that I guess tried to create a problem by saying I raised my voice when they said my dad was struck with cancer and going to die soon. But the main interpreter, when anything really serious going on, they brought in a female interpreter, a civilian interpreter, and she was phenomenal. She spoke better English than you and I.
Right. And did you have any communication with the other inmates at the prison? Were you able to talk to them, or?
I got to work for a couple months in the electric factory. So you can only talk when you go outside for your 30 minutes of walking or exercise, if you will. And you can only talk to one person. You can't be face to face. You have to be side by side, because if you're face to face, I guess that's showing hostility. So you can walk side by side and talk. It can't be three of you. It can only be two people together walking. Can't be a third person. So your conversations are very limited.
Right. Did you manage to have any conversations at all with other prisoners?
Oh, sure. During that time.
Did they know who you were?
Yeah, they knew who I was when I got there.
And what did they say to you?
Just because they had heard about the story. It wasn't me so much. They heard about the story.
Right. And did they say anything to you?
Of course. They said, oh, yeah, that was great. We were all cheering for you. That was horrible that you guys got extradited. And what about your son? The poor guy seemed like he didn't have much to do with this, but the politics got him also. I said, yeah, unfortunately, it did.
I suppose people who are listening, we have quite a lot of people listening online, Mike, and I suppose people who are listening will say two things to all of this. They'll say, first of all, well, prison in Japan is not a picnic for good reason, because you're being punished for committing a crime. I mean, actually, I've been to that prison, Fuchi prison, and I've interviewed the assistant governor, and he said that. He said, well, I've been to prisons around the world, and we're shocked because it's the inmates who often control those prisons. Here, we control the prisons, and it's not supposed to be a good time. That's the first thing they'll say. The other thing I think Japan will say is that if you look at our criminal justice system, we have far fewer people in prison here than most other countries in the world, especially America. America is a very high prison population. And our prisons are generally, if you take away the rules that you've just described, the cold in the winter, the heat in the summer, the bad food and so on, actually they're quite humane in the sense that, you're not walking around being afraid of murder, being hurt or killed in prison. Do you want to respond to that? I'm sort of ventriloquizing what the Justice Ministry would say if they were here, or other people would say.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So you want to compare it to the prisons in the United States? So two wrongs makes it right. You understand that one. And if they believe their prison system's good, why are they a signature of the Convention Against Torture? Why did they sign that saying and knowing that Article 2 says you can't do those things and there's no excuse whatsoever? Why does the Ministry of Justice in the country of Japan sign that then? Let's also talk about why they have less people in jail. Well, the United States is a little bit bigger. So I don't want to get into all the demographics and the population size, but I think the United States population a little bit bigger. Now, I'm not defending the prison system in the United States. I definitely think we have too many people incarcerated. But let's talk about those questions about Japan. Of course, prison's not supposed to be a nice place. But again, torturing, and you're a signature of the United Nations Convention Against Torture, saying you won't do those things. You won't put people in solitary confinement for 15 consecutive days or more. Why are you doing that? Why did you sign that document then? That's the questions back to the Ministry of Justice.
Well, as I keep saying,
let me ask you. Let me further this. Why do you keep? It's a violation of the United Nations definition on torture, because the United Nations considers the torture also if you keep that prisoner in complete dark or lights on 24 hours a day, which Japan does.
Sure.
So again, you according to the document you agreed to and signed, are committing torture. Help me understand why.
Well, I will underline that question and again extend our invitation to the Justice Minister or to anybody from the Justice Ministry who is available to come and talk to us. So thank you for the answer. The next question is from Roger Schreffler, who's Ward's Automotive, a journalist for Ward's Automotive. Can you tell us a little bit about the pilots who helped Mr. Gon escape, they were Turkish, is that right? Are you able to talk about those?
Yeah, they were Turkish pilots, and only one of them, well, I think it was the main pilot that, I don't remember. I don't know, one or two of them have both been trained in the United States, or trained in the United States with the U.S. military. But they were both put in prison for migrant smuggling. Now, there was no migrant smuggled. First of all, Carlos entered Istanbul, Turkey on a Lebanese passport or his Lebanese ID card, and he was transit. He didn't go through customs, he was transit. So he has a Lebanese passport, he has a French passport, and he has a Lebanese ID card. But going through Turkey, you don't have to show any ID because he's transit. He's just getting on another airplane. Now, when I went there, I got off the private aircraft at the private terminal, got a visa on an American passport, and went to the commercial airport and left Turkey. So there was no migrant smuggled into the country. They were jailed for that. And I think a lot has to do with, again, the humiliation aspect. And Japan spends a lot of money on lobbyists, and they have a lot of influence, economic influence. These pilots won a year and a half or 2 years later on appeal because they won their appeal and proved to be innocent. Their Supreme Court declared them innocent, not guilty of any of this, because the fact that Carlos never stayed in Turkey. He was transit. You don't need a visa to be transit. And I got a visa when I entered. So again, there was no violation of law there, but their lives were uprooted. Severe loss of financial earnings, and put in prison and humiliated, all that stuff, and there was no violation of law.
So just to be clear,
that's the answer to that question.
Thank you. Just to be clear, what you seem to be saying is that the Japanese authorities, because they were humiliated by this caper, they leaned on the authorities in America and in Turkey to have people arrested and detained in a way that you feel was illegal.
No, unfortunately, it's legal. Lobbyists are legal in the United States. You do it in Nigeria, it's a crime. It's called corruption, or most other countries. But here it's legal because you're hiring a lobbyist. But also, look, there's a long history of relationships between the United States and Japan. I get that, that's nice and all that. But, there's people like Professor William Cleary, who's a professor of criminal law in Japan. I don't know, for 15, 20 years, something like that. Still today, he says, I didn't commit any crime in Japan by bringing Carlos Ghosn out. So when we were first detained here in the United States, based on the extradition request from Japan, there was no crime charged. We were being held without a crime. So that's number one. And two, they finally came around with charging us with a violation of the Japanese Penal Code, Article 103, which is harboring. Harboring under that statute is when police are actively looking for a suspect or a fugitive. So you broke them out of the back of a police car, broke them out of a jail, and you're hiding them. Or the police came to your house in pursuit of somebody and knocked on your door, and you're hiding him in your bedroom, and you said you don't have him. That's a violation of Article 103. That wasn't the case. Carlos was on bail. He was free to travel anywhere within Japan. And bail jumping is not a crime in Japan.
Bail jumping.
A lot of Americans, a lot of Westerners don't realize that bail jumping in Japan is not a crime. So if bail jumping is not a crime, how can aiding bail jumping be a crime?
Didn't they change the law in Japan so that they made bail jump in the wake of Gon's escape? Didn't they change the law? Yes, I believe they did. So they made it illegal afterwards.
But that's not relevant. That's not relevant to us. The fact of the matter is, when I brought him out on December 29th, 2019, bail jumping was not a crime in Japan.
Right. as I understand it, you may have some resentment against the authorities, the American authorities, not just the Japanese authorities, but the Trump White House, because they, they certainly didn't go to bat for you. But if I'm interpreting what you say correctly, you think there may have been some political maneuvering behind the scenes to actually get you here.
Well, you have my case, which we know about, and then you have the case of Takata airbags. That's the Takata airbags. There's 3 Japanese citizens indicted in federal court in Michigan in December of 2016 for the deaths of 16 Americans. The deaths of 16 Americans. The death toll has climbed up to 29. So they didn't get extradited. We're talking about deaths of human beings. Again, something that may have been immigration violation, and we got extradited.
Does that mean?
Does it make you scratch your head and wonder? Does it make you scratch your head and wonder how the heck did that happen?
I'm scratching it right now. Yeah, I'm just. Do you think that, or have you had any indication that there was some political maneuvering behind the scenes, that Trump or the Trump White House was contacted by Japan and that this was somehow
Did Secretary of State contact me or one of my lawyers and say, hey, this is what we're doing, we got an inside ball game? No, absolutely not. But the State Department did give the federal judge in Boston, Judge Pawani, she gave me some kind of document saying they won't be tortured, because that's a real issue. And everybody knows about it. It's on the State Department's website. And the State Department did provide a sworn statement saying more likely than not, they won't be tortured. That's interesting. That's real interesting. We all know it's a bunch of BS because you're going to get tortured, because that's what Japan jail system does. And we just saw recently, probably within the last, 10 months, that a British judge refused extradition of some British citizens who were charged with robbing a jewelry store, Harry Winston jewelry store in Japan, for some $700,000, hurt a Japanese guard. They were trying to get him extradited from the UK back to Japan, and a UK judge said, no, I'm not going to extradite based off of your human rights issue. They're going to be tortured. There's a good likelihood they're going to be tortured, so we're not going to authorize extradition.
Right. The case actually, which is getting more attention in Japan at the moment, or has got more attention, is the head of Sea Shepherd, a anti-whaling group. Paul Watson was captured in Greenland, I believe, and the Greenland authorities have refused to extradite him back to Japan for, I believe, similar reasons. So presumably you would advise any government around the world to not extradite its citizens to this country.
Well, any government in the world that is a signature of the Hague Convention shouldn't do it, because they're in violation of the Convention Against Torture themselves for doing it.
Right. So you're
now, if you want to torture people, and do that, you should remove your name as a signature of the Convention Against Torture.
Got it. Okay. Another question from Roger Schreffler of Wards Automotive. Did the U.S. ambassador offer to help you, as he did to Greg Kelly?
No, we had no assistance that we're aware of from the U.S. ambassador whatsoever, no communication whatsoever.
And the U.S. ambassador at the time was?
Rob Emanuel.
Right. And he hasn't been in touch since? He hasn't indicated to you any sympathy with what happened to you, or he hasn't been in touch?
No, we've never heard a word from the American ambassador.
Right. And again, I mean, a similar question, but you feel that somehow that this wasn't anonymous justice kind of taking its course, that somehow there was politics involved in the background here. That
that's what I believe.
As you said, you humiliated Japan and you were being punished in some way, and the American authorities were co-opted into this venture, is what you believe.
Yeah, that's what I believe that full-heartedly. I believe that.
Okay. Just a question from myself. You used to live in Beirut, is that right? You had a home in Beirut.
No, I had a home there. I didn't live there.
You didn't live
Never
there,
lived
right?
in
So
Beirut per se.
right. So it's just. I mean, it's obviously people will ask this question. I mean, you didn't know Gon. You weren't in touch with him. You didn't know him before all this kicked off.
No, I did not. I did not.
All right. And tell us about your son. So obviously, Peter had this very traumatic experience. According to you, he wasn't even involved in what took place. He wasn't involved in the planning. He wasn't really a partner in this caper, right?
That's correct.
Right. And how has he managed to acclimatize back to life in the U.S.? What's he doing now?
He's doing well. He got married since then to a lovely girl, Eva, and they had a beautiful baby boy, Alexander, 6 months ago. And once you have your first child like that, the world just peaches and cream, and he's enjoying it. And he's got a great partner, his wife, beautiful young lady, and a beautiful baby. So couldn't be better.
Good. And what about yourself? What have you been doing? I understand that you've started up a company. Makes a vitamin drink.
No, I had the company. I had the company before. It's called Vitamin One. Actually, here it is, right here. I'm drinking it. You can get it on Amazon. Hopefully, we'll be distributing in the coast countries pretty soon. Pre-COVID, we were selling it in Lebanon and Qatar, but now since then, the shipping costs went through the roof, so on and so forth. But hopefully, we'll get a partner here shortly in the Gulf Coast countries and be selling it. It's a no sugar, delicious hydration drink with good energy enhancing vitamins and all natural flavors, electrolytes, and only 10 calories. So even diabetics can drink it.
All right. And are you still in debt from this, from your legal fees and so on, or has that all been cleared up?
Oh, no. I'm still working on paying it off.
Do you want to tell us how much you're paying
It'll
off?
take time.
Do you want to tell us how
What's
much?
that?
How much are you in debt to the tune of?
Nope. Oh, it's a lot. For me, it's a lot.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars?
Oh, yeah.
Right. And nobody's helping you? You don't have any sympathizers who will pay that off?
I wish I did. My mom used to tell me, when your rich uncle gets out of the poorhouse. I wish I had a rich uncle getting out of the poorhouse.
The next question is from Rion, I believe it's Rion McAvoy, Japan Media Services. At what point did you fully grasp the personal and legal risks you were taking, and what motivated you to proceed despite them? I know you've talked about your motivation, but maybe the first point, when did you fully grasp the legal risks, the personal legal risks? Also, what would you like the general public to take away from your experience and Gon's escape?
That's a great question, because a lot of people don't realize this, but I checked with legal counsel before I did this, with several different attorneys, international attorneys, and all of them told me that bail jumping's not a crime. So assisting somebody bail jumping is not a crime. It's like driving to the supermarket. Driving to the supermarket's not a crime. So giving somebody a ride to the supermarket isn't a crime either. That's why it was really shocking to me when I first learned about my personal legal situation and I really became aware of it, that I think it was January 20th something, when the Japanese police actually issued a warrant for my arrest. And that's when, I started questioning, well, wait a minute. All the lawyers, when I was doing the research on this, said that it wasn't a crime. So how can these guys be charging me with a crime? This is interesting. So it was a totally different perspective and came out of left field for me, because I thought, based on the legal counsel, that we were on good ground, that we weren't violating a law.
Were any of these legal experts Japanese?
No Japanese lawyers.
I have a question here in the room. Dozo. Do you want to come to the? Sorry, do you want to come to the microphone? Yeah. Sorry, Mike. Can you give your affiliation, please? The name of your company.
Hi, Mr. Taylor. I'm Otone Tatsumi from GG Press. I have 3 questions for you. First, why did you decide to hold a press conference now? I suppose you are aware that Mr. Gosen is also holding a press conference today. Why did you decide to do it now? Yeah.
I was asked to do this. I didn't decide to do it. I was asked to do this because it's coming up on the 5th year anniversary. So I agreed to do it to answer questions for people that had questions.
You feel more comfortable talking about this topic now?
I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel uncomfortable. But if there's questions out there, and really why I'm doing this is to shed light on a system that people get tortured in. And maybe there can be some change. Maybe the Ministry of Justice, somebody inside will say, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't put people in solitary confinement for long periods of time.
Okay.
Maybe we shouldn't turn lights on. Maybe we shouldn't turn lights on for 24 hours a day.
Okay, thank you. Another question. I want to go back to a question about money. I know you don't want to talk about it in detail, but I think it's very important because you and your family ended up sacrificing a lot for the operation. According to some reports that Mr. Gosen has paid you 100,000 for your legal fees. Can you confirm on that number?
Is that 500,000?
Yeah.
$500,000. Yeah.
What's the question?
About the legal fees that Mr. Gosen paid you.
There have been stories that Gon paid you and your family $500,000 for your legal fees.
I don't know numbers. I'm not going to get into numbers. Don't know exact numbers. But he has paid some for legal fees, absolutely.
But you said you are still in debt, right?
Yes, I am.
So it's not really enough.
Lawyers are one of the few professions on earth that you go through misery and tragedy and whatnot, and at the end of it, you still owe them money.
Could you say like how much percentage of the legal fees Mr. Gosen has paid you?
No, I can't because number one, I don't know it. Number two, legal fees from where? There's so many different legal fees from all over the place. You got to have an accountant just to handle the amounts that are owed into whom. But no, I won't get into that. And I've given my word I won't get into it.
You see why people are pursuing this question, though, Mike, right? I mean, a lot of people will see your circumstances where you're in debt, you took this enormous risk, and then you were punished for it, and you spent time in prison. But your legal fees have not been paid by the man that you helped. That's why everybody's curious about this question.
Well, some of them have been. There's still outstanding legal fees there. That's true.
I mean, you're confident that he will pay your fees eventually.
Well, I believe he'll pay whatever he can pay. Look, there's so many other things that go on here. It's not that simple. I wish it was that simple. I wish life was that simple. But just the legal fees in Japan alone were a little over $500,000. And some people question that, saying, you didn't even go to a trial. How can you have an expenditure of $500,000 and you only pled guilty? Again, I understand Japan's an expensive place, but I don't know. Doesn't that seem like a lot?
It does seem like a lot to me. Your third question?
Last question. Is there anything you want to say to Mr. Gerson? Do you think he owes you apology? Is there anything that you want to say to him?
No, I feel bad for his wife that she still has a red notice. I think the red notice is an abuse also. Does anybody know the crime they charged her with? So she has to have a red notice for the rest of her life for a crime that maybe you got to serve 6 months or a year in jail. I see that they like using red notices, and I would say abusing the power of a red notice. They'll put that out there. So somebody is under a red notice for 10 years or 20 years, when in fact their max penalty of the crime would be 2 or 3 years. So I would think that red notice should be dissolved or eliminated, terminated at the max sentence. So if somebody's max sentence on a crime that they're charged with, which is how they got a red notice, is 2 years, that red notice should only be good for 2 years. That's something that, I would like to discuss with people.
The perception in Japan is that Gon himself is rich and free and that he will be fine, right? That's the general perception, is that he's comfortable, he's okay, right? So again, there will be suspicions based on what you've said that he hasn't paid you or compensated you properly for the enormous risks that you took, personal and legal.
Well, I heard stories when this first happened of so-called experts saying what it would cost. And I heard things like 10 million, 20 million, $30 million. And not one of those people that the news media had, or the so-called experts, have ever done something like this. They've never even done it in a foreign country, rescuing a child that was abducted, yet they're being used as experts and talking about that. That's comical. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't know the fees. Nobody knows the fees on something like this. So it's not like something you're going to set up and do in a contract where, okay, it's going to happen like this, and this is what you're going to pay, like a retainer agreement with lawyers or consultants. Life doesn't work that way. This is so unique in that regard.
But don't you feel unfair that while you have been in prison, Mr. Gosen has been enjoying his freedom while you and your son has been in prison? Don't you feel it's unfair?
Look, I feel horrible for my son. That's the worst thing that you can have as a father, as a parent, is something like that to happen to your son. And some people don't understand that unless they have a child. That to me was the worst. But having Carlos out and free, no, that was the purpose of the mission. And let's talk about the operation of the mission. I thought it was pretty darn good. So I don't think Mission Impossible had anything on me. It was a pretty good operation overall. Was it wrong in the end? Politically, I guess it was wrong. Did they come up with a charge? Did my son and I serve time for it? Yeah. In that regard, yeah. I wish that didn't happen. That wasn't in the plan, and I didn't know we were violating the law. Again, hindsight's 20/20. Had I known this was going to happen like this, of course, I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have intentionally broken laws.
So do you regret taking up the operation?
Do I regret it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I regret certain things about it. Do I regret fighting the principle of people being tortured? Absolutely not. I don't regret that at all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just let me finish. We're nearly out of time, Mike. Just the question that Mr. McAvoy asked, which is, what would you like the general public to take away from your experience and Gon's escape? Was the last question that he asked.
Let's try to get some change in the justice system. Let's try to make it so people aren't tortured. Let's try to make it so attorneys can be present for interrogations. Let's try to make it so there's attorney-client privilege there. Those are some of the real aspects. Let's look at, why wasn't this settled in the boardroom? Why did it have to get into a courtroom? That's some of the things about the case that I still today don't understand. Why wasn't this handled in the boardroom?
Okay, and just finally, I understand in the great Hollywood tradition that they're going to make a movie about this escape. Is that right? Of MGM UA, I read online, and it's going to star Sam Rockwell, who presumably will play you, will he? He's not going to play Gon.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. That's what I understand. And I actually met Sam Rockwell. What a classy guy. What a great actor. I saw one of his most recent movies. He's an Academy Award winner. He's a pretty special guy and a pretty brilliant guy.
So this is going to go ahead, this movie?
I don't know. I've heard it's going to happen.
All right. Well, Thank you very much, Mike, for joining us from the United States. You're in the East Coast, are you?
I am.
So it's late at night for you there, is it?
No, it's only 10 p.m.
Oh, it's only 10 p.m. Okay. Well, thank you so much. It's Michael Taylor, former U.S. Green Beret, the man who helped engineer Curtis Cohen's escape. Thank you for joining us today. It's been fascinating, and a happy Christmas to you and all your family.
Thank you. You too. Merry Christmas.
Bye-bye. Thank you. And thank you to everybody in the room.